Hello to everyone joining. I'm just going to give it a few seconds while people get in the room here before we get started.
I like to block the boxes in the background with my head.
That's why I have a virtual background turned on.
That's very appropriate.
Well, you've got your logos going. I guess I could have an IndieWire thing behind me. That would be truly obnoxious.
My computer doesn't have the processing speed for that, and I'd gone and found a big high-res picture of the hallway from The Shining.
Oh, yes.
I really wanted,
Genius.
but I was thwarted.
Is there going to be a recording of this, Clay?
There is going to be a recording of this, primarily for filmmakers who missed the session.
Any chance I could get a hold of one?
I think so. Lauren, who's on here with Palm Springs, can check on that for you.
Thanks.
Okay,
I'll make sure we get that to you, Anne.
Thank you.
Great. Looks like we have almost everybody in. I'm sure there will be some late arrivals, but let's just get going here. There's lots to discuss, especially during this time. My name is Clay Pruitt. I am the ShortFest Forum producer. Welcome, everybody. Good morning, if it's morning where you are. Good afternoon, good evening, if it is, depending on where you are calling in from. That is definitely the silver lining of being in this situation. We're able to welcome people from all around the world, whereas previously many of you may not have been able to join in person. So excited to have that be part of the opportunity we're able to provide here. And have the chance to listen to this incredible panel of folks who are being so generous with their time and their expertise to talk to you all for a little bit. So before we kick things off, I want to say on behalf of the festival, we want to acknowledge the pain and anger that we're all feeling right now. Not just about the most recent events we've witnessed, but also about the longstanding history of injustice and inequality. We stand with Black Lives Matter, and we are committed to working together to move our community, our country, and the world closer to unity, understanding, and inclusivity. Quickly, we are utilizing the Q&A function in this session, so if you have questions, please put those in that area, which is located at the bottom of your screen. There's a little Q&A button. We will get to those towards the end of the discussion. And without further ado, I want to turn things over to our wonderful moderator for today, Ann Thompson.
Thank you, Clay. I always enjoy coming to this festival. I'm usually witnessing all of you hobnobbing and networking and hanging out with each other and cheering each other on. And I've always gotten a lot of inspiration from that. And I'm sorry you aren't able to do that this year. So this is the Palm Springs ShortFest Forum virtual edition. And obviously navigating the festival landscape has never been more challenging than it is right now. A lot of the things that festivals do are harder, much harder to achieve, especially meeting each other in person. Everything's changing. The festivals are going, or they're canceling, or they're going virtual, or the Oscars have changed their dates. All the other, a lot of the other award shows are following suit. So everything is up in the air and nobody knows anything, but this panel knows a lot. And I'm happy to have them here to help us navigate through this challenging time. So I'm going to start with Dilcia Barrera from Sundance, and we're going to go around in alphabetical order, and everybody's going to introduce themselves. And I would like you to explain exactly where your festival fits into this. What is your role when you come to a festival? And if you're not a festival, what is your role in this whole landscape? Starting with Dilcia.
Hi everyone, my name is Dilcia Barrera. I am a Sundance Film Festival programmer. I specifically focus in narrative feature-length films, but the last, I think, 6 years I was a shorts programmer there. And Sundance has a wonderful point in the journey of a film, as it is at the beginning of the year, and then in some senses a launching pad for many films, including short films. So we have the privilege of hosting a lot of world premieres and guiding people towards the next year of their life through film festivals. And a film festival like Sundance, the main objective is to be able to single out new voices, and usually voices that come out of Sundance have a journey towards awards season like the Spirit Awards, but also getting momentum and winning awards that can eventually lead short filmmakers to be nominated for an Oscar, essentially. But we can keep talking about more details about what that means.
Okay, the next candidate here would be Stephanie Owen.
Hi, I'm Stephanie. I'm one of the programmers with Palm Springs ShortFest. I'm also an associate programmer with Sundance, and I used to program for the LA Film Festival.
And what would you say what would you ordinarily be looking for at a Palm Springs Film Festival? What would your role here be if you were here?
Well, this is actually my first year with the festival, so unfortunately I'm not getting that in-person experience. But as far as, do you mean like for our review process, our screening process?
Sure, that's a good place to start.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm especially interested in new filmmakers, new voices. So, you know, my ears definitely perk up when I see first-time filmmakers, or just any sort of subject matter that I haven't seen before, any sort of approach to a subject that I haven't seen before. So that's really what sort of gets me most excited.
Christopher Raxter.
Hi, I'm Christopher. Originally a filmmaker, specializing in queer content, both narratives, short, documentary. So I came at it from understanding the whole festival circuit, from Sundance to Tribeca to the smaller festivals. Most recently, I was executive director of OutFest. Many of you are probably familiar, LGBTQ film festival and media arts organization. And now I've transitioned to festival consultant for a myriad of festivals, helping to improve their infrastructure. So I think a lot of what I bring to the table is both OutFest and how we lean into focusing on underrepresented voices, specifically making sure that we're representing authentic depictions, in particularly the more marginalized voices, even within the queer community, leaning into trans, indigenous, POC, non-binary, and disabled storytelling. And then as a filmmaker, I feel your pain and share your joy in producing content and getting it into festivals around the world.
Brevin Warren.
Hi, congratulations for all of you for being here, and thank you for joining us. So for film festivals, my resume is a lot of operations from Sundance, Film Independent, OutFest, AFI, and then as a programmer, Slam Dance, associate level at OutFest and AFI as well. And I run a film festival, which is mostly focused on mentorship. So we're looking to learn from our filmmakers as well as hopefully mentor them on their journey. And I say that because I'm also in doctoral research at USC, looking at inclusion in the industry specifically for emerging filmmakers. So I very much learn from my filmmakers every year. We're in our 12th year, but I've been in some level of graduate school for the last 5 years, learning from my filmmakers and hopefully learning a lot to hopefully address how we support emerging filmmakers in the nonprofit space as well as the studio space.
Diana Ward.
Hi, I'm Diana. I'm a producer. I produced a feature doc called Roller Dreams, which you can stream on Hulu. And I've also produced numerous award-winning short films that have won festivals like South by Southwest, Berlinale, and AFI.
Well, thank you. This is a great group. So getting shorts, who have I missed? Boyana.
Sorry, my internet dropped out, so I dipped out.
So much for my alphabetical skills. Go ahead.
No worries. So my name is Boyana. I'm the programming director at New Filmmakers Los Angeles. We're a monthly festival that's focused on emerging voices, on bringing new perspectives and finding fresh voices in filmmaking. So really we're looking at everybody who is making independent work. Our program is primarily made up of shorts. And so at ShortFest, I would really be looking for exciting new films, talking to you all and meeting you, and really kind of to echo a lot of what Stephanie said, looking for stories that are told in either new stories told or old stories told in new ways with new perspectives, and really like the idea of something that is fresh and that is exciting, and that is from communities that we also typically don't hear as much from with the mainstream content that we have available now. So that's really our focus.
I'm seeing a theme emerge from a lot of what you guys are saying. It sounds like getting a short to sort of pop out of the fray is one of the most important things a filmmaker can do. Who wants to talk about that? How do you get attention from a short? What is the way to go in that regard, so that you don't look like every other short that's being submitted? Diane, I'm going to ask you.
Well, for me as a producer, I specifically look for stories that that feel different to me as well. Like, I get to read a lot of scripts, and there's a lot of films where the filmmakers might be excellent filmmakers, but they're stories that I'm personally not connected to. I feel like stories, for me, the stories need to be sort of really represent that director, and it doesn't mean that they have to tell their own personal stories, but they need to have a very specific point of view. And I find a lot of short filmmakers haven't quite got there. They're making short films to figure out what their point of view is. So for me, it's very much about like looking at the script, looking at the potential. Like, the script doesn't necessarily have to be well written, but the intention and the story obviously needs to be there. And then obviously I would work with that filmmaker. Sometimes I get scripts that come in that are just wonderful already as well, but for me it's very much about just looking for that interesting voice, or that voice who's saying something that I haven't seen before.
Anybody else want to weigh in on that?
Go ahead, Dilcia.
Oh, sure. I just want to always point out the significance of authenticity, especially getting caught up in panels like this or in discussions like this. There's always a certain level of trying to figure out what programmers or other people are looking for. And I think putting that as a second priority is always important, and focusing more on your own personal story, or having a story that comes from somewhere authentic, not trying to make a story that will get you an Oscar or get you into Sundance. And that's simply because we can see that after watching thousands of films. You can see the same types of either themes or techniques in some sense of storytelling that are kind of just being repeated in some sense. So the level of authenticity can take you really far, and authenticity just comes from your own self, almost questioning or your own stories and exploring that.
Right.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I'll just add, one thing that I would encourage filmmakers to do is to just constantly be questioning themselves throughout the process of making their film, asking, why am I making this film? How am I connected to this film? How is my perspective unique to how I'm telling this story? Because I think, to add to what Dilcia and Diana were saying, if you're just, if you think a certain subject matter has a lore and is going to get you awards, then we're going to see through that. You need to be able to connect to a specific part of the story.
Agreed. Mine is sort of a follow-on, and it's probably redundant, but this is not a feature film that you're trying to appeal to a mass audience and second guess what a mass audience wants. It's not a place to second guess what you think the programmers want. Specific, personal, authentic always wins.
Can you tell some stories, the programmers here, of films that really broke out and surprised and delivered, that you've seen in recent years? Some kind of success story, some model of something that would be something to follow if possible. If any good stories like that you can think of?
I'll tell you one short that has stuck with me for 10 years. The first time I went to Sundance, I went to a shorts program, and I love shorts. It's an art to tell a story so succinctly. Not everyone can do it. There was a short by Sean Q, who started out as a choreographer, called Pretty Dead Girl. And it was a musical about necrophilia. It was Christian, Christian Campbell, who did a complete musical, falling in love with this pretty dead corpse. So specific, played Deshawn's idea, weird and kooky, brilliantly executed, very short. I can still see it in my head to this day. I mean, it literally is like, you can get that specific and take a chance on something that somebody may not finance as a feature, because it is something you love and adore and have to see made.
Anyone else have a success story to tell?
I immediately think constantly about the career of Janixa Bravo. She made a short film that first played actually online. So this is a good point for people to think of where they want to put their shorts. Well, this year's a little bit different because rules for online have skewed. But at that point, playing a film online would mean no longer being eligible for a lot of festivals or awards, but she still played her film online, Gregory Go Boom. At Sundance, we don't, for shorts, have a premiere requirement for short films, so we still played her film. Her film won the Grand Jury Prize for short films. She has then, made Lemon. Her new film is now going to debut, Zola, but she's been directing TV. So I think a film like that, whether you decide to put it online or, there's definitely a tract for every decision you make, and you don't really have to follow a specific, step-by-step of how to get to where you're trying to get.
How has programming changed in recent years? And we will pivot from that question onto the pandemic question, which we have to address. But if we just look in the rear view, how have these festivals changed in recent years in terms of programming, would you say? How about Dilcia? Again.
That's me. There's many ways festival programming has changed. I think starting off with not only technology and ability, first of all, a lot of festivals have gone green thanks to no longer using DVDs. So that's something even simple but very significant because of the amount of films we watch. But also, I think the construction and DNA of the festival teams have changed. We are now experiencing a lot more equity. For example, at Sundance, the team has definitely changed from past generations to our new generation, and including wonderful people like Stephanie, which I think is a soul to our insignificant and extremely significant to our team. But also the way we program has changed because we have not new priorities, but we have definitely emphasized priorities of inclusivity and equity in terms of what we're showing and in terms of representation, not only behind, but in front of the camera. So I think that's definitely something that we are currently working on and will continue to work on towards better, becoming better at that.
Boyana? Do you have an answer to that one?
Yeah.
How things have changed? Yeah.
I need to start with, definitely, I would echo what Dilcia said, that we are seeing a lot more kind of equity, diversity, and a very intentional focus on those things, both behind the scenes at festivals and what's on the screen, which I think is really important for a number of reasons, culturally, societally, but also in terms of, if we look at what we're really looking for, are new stories, new perspectives. I mean, this is, festivals are looking for new perspectives and new ways to inform, enlighten, and challenge audiences every year. That's a big part of what we do, and that's a big part of what programming is. And so I think that that's something that is definitely, those two purposes are dovetailing really significantly at this moment, which is really great to see. And New Filmmakers, which I've been with now for a couple of years, but their mission since they were founded 12 years ago was based on that from the start. So it's like really kind of great time to be with this organization. And I mean, I would also say that a lot of the things that have changed have been, especially with shorts, have been due to like technological access in terms of who can make a film and what that barrier to entry looks like. Because it is more widely available, because you can shoot things with your phone. Cameras are becoming, became a lot more affordable. And the platforms for shorts have also expanded. I think compared to even 5 years ago, the places that you can go to see shorts now, and the way that even people interact with shorts that are posted online have changed significantly. So I think that there are more pathways than ever to getting a short seen. And considering that that's the beginning of most filmmakers' careers, typically do start in shorts, that's kind of become a more expansive place with more points of entry, I think, in the last even 5 years, but 10 years for sure.
Anyone else want to add to that before we move on to the pandemic question?
I think one thing that's really been interesting, and our programmers are thinking about audiences differently, and going back to Boyana's point about informing and challenging, I think many of us are really embracing our role in helping to shape and drive understanding and cultural change. It seems like a little thing, but a titanic thing at Outfest were, we had a very binary shorts program of there was always the boys' shorts and the girls' shorts. You were serving certain communities, and then we tended to segregate these shorts programs, but really taking a moment and then assuring that in the girls' shorts, because there is a dedicated audience, that all women identifying voices were included, to both honor that truth and to make sure that our audiences that were oftentimes historic and traditional continue to move along and learn and grow. And I think that's an incredibly powerful tool to shape change, but it's also a purposeful tool to make sure that more stories are seen by more people, and hopefully developing an appetite for understanding and consuming even more of those stories. So I'm really proud of the progression within programming thought processes.
Okay, everybody. So what has happened this year? How has let's break it down. I mean, how bad has it been for emerging filmmakers? What has the impact of these festivals closing and not happening or turning virtual have been? And how is the business itself adapting and changing to try to help out these filmmakers who have been in some cases left a little bit marooned? Let's just go. We'll start with Brevin.
Sure. I think this goes back to some of the other questions about the evolution of the industry. One of the things that have definitely happened is that I have little ones in the house, is that there are so many more festivals, right? There are thousands of festivals around the world, which adds a complication for filmmakers to figure out what's important to them. Because, we talked about before about authenticity and the filmmaker's individual journey, which doesn't mean that there is a single path, right, for a filmmaker to go from, X festival to the next festival. And somehow that's the journey to be a filmmaker. So with so many festivals, it becomes more of a question of what is that individual filmmaker's journey and what are their goals. And we're at a really interesting, call it like a checkpoint for festivals to decide what is their place and who do they want to support, so that we may be thinning out some of the thousands of festivals because they can't all support themselves anymore. But maybe those festivals get to focus a little bit more on what their place is for the filmmaker and how they want to support the filmmaker more specifically. So while it is a complicated space, right, for businesses to support themselves or organizations to support themselves, I think it's a potentially exciting time as well, because festivals really get to decide who they're supporting, why they're supporting those makers, and who they're going to address both from an audience standpoint and from a filmmaker standpoint. So
you mean they're leaning into their strengths in order to survive?
yeah, I think everyone has to kind of take a moment right now. Every organization gets to take a moment, whether they wanted to or not, right? To focus on what are their strengths, as you say, and how can they support their filmmakers best in this time, because they can't do everything, right? And I think that was something a lot of festivals wanted to do in the recent past, is they wanted to be a giant party, and they wanted to support all the filmmakers around the world, and they wanted to say they were everything. But now we're challenged to, no, like, what exactly can you do for filmmakers, and how does it benefit them?
Anyone else?
I'll say something. I think this is an interesting time and opportunity for film festivals. I mean, obviously the larger, more prestigious festivals, if as long as they can financially make it work, I doubt, you know, a lot of them will have major changes. But I think a lot of the smaller festivals should use this time to think about what their purpose in starting the festival was, and what their ongoing wants and needs are, because both as a filmmaker but also as an audience member for film festivals, there's so many film festivals. There's too many film festivals right now, I think, to really be effective on a broader scale. And so one thing that festivals could look at is like joining together, so not necessarily getting rid of really small festivals, but joining together to form regional festival groups, so that each festival actually teams up and each of them can maintain a unique programming voice, but play together and travel around, say, the one state, so that they can still reach all these different audiences, and then also not just program for a majority audience in their big city where they might be based, but actually think about different films from different people, actually being able to show those as well. And I think that would serve filmmakers so much better.
Does anyone else share my concern, though, that so many filmmakers are basically being deprived? I mean, this festival is happening. This is a focused shorts film festival, but it's still not going to have the same impact, right, that it might have had.
For sure. And I feel really bad. One of my directors, like, she's just having her film premiered next week online. And I feel really like it's her first short film as a director. And I really feel for her, because she's not going to be able to have that traditional film festival experience. But at the same time,
it's about networking. It's about making friends. It's about a whole generation of people moving through the industry together, right?
Yeah.
Time, and I'm sorry, Diana, I didn't want to step on you if you weren't finished.
No, please go ahead.
None of the festivals really know what they're doing in this moment. And I mean that in the best possible way, because we've never been confronted with this challenge, and we are all learning, and it is forcing some innovation that was coming down the pike anyways, and we probably should have looked at a few years ago. So there is a net benefit in the long run, in that I think you will see all festivals become a bit of a hybrid, more online, less in person. And it'll take us a year or two to figure that out. What does that look like, and how is it going to look? So I think long term, we will get to an advantageous point again. Short term, I think one of the most devastating thing is, with the exception maybe of somebody like Palm Springs, no one is able to show the amount of films they traditionally would. So there are a lot of really incredible voices that aren't being seen. One upside for a short filmmaker, unless you're like me and put everything in that short on your mom's credit card the first time, like there's no money motivation to get it out there and doing something fast. If you can and want to wait a beat, 2021 is still going to be a mess. We don't know what's happening. Everybody wants to go back to terrestrial, but who knows? But if you can wait a beat, okay. But, the other good thing with shorts is they have a longer tail. Much like Dilsey was saying, fewer people have restrictions in regards to where it has been shown before. And a good story is a good story, and a festival will always want to find those special good stories. So my hope is there will be continued opportunity through 2021 for those who were not seen. I'm also a big Pollyanna. I always hope for that, but I do think there's some truth in that. So I think there is an upside, mostly for short filmmakers. I think it's a different world for feature filmmakers right now.
So what are the innovations that have come out of this period that could endure? You mentioned one of them, which would be that there would be, are we looking at a more virtual festival landscape forever? And have the rules of what you can show online that you mentioned before, have they changed? All right, explain that to people, what I'm talking about. What are those rules and have they changed? Maybe Dulcie can do that one.
So for different festivals, a lot of festivals that require a premiere within their region. Especially, I'll just speak about shorts. So for example, you know, Tribeca was a festival that required premiere. Berlin required premiere. Toronto required a premiere to play your short film at their festival. So some festivals, and I recommend everybody that is looking into submitting their films moving forward to look into their rules and regulations and their FAQs, because all of them have probably changed or are addressing this in a different way. At Sundance, we have now put up a new FAQ with new rules that are clarifying some misconceptions and some questions about what it means to be eligible for Sundance. Basically, if we are allowing people to submit to our festival, even though they were accepted to another festival but did not play there. So there's that's a new shift. So that means if you were accepted to South by Southwest but didn't premiere on, you know, the Amazon app and all, you know, the different options that South by Southwest presented, then you are still eligible to submit to Sundance and, you know, be considered. So there's a couple of ways that you can navigate this. I, again, emphasize strongly to look through everybody's rules, because of how easy it is to submit through Film Freeway, et cetera. It's so easy to just click and pay your, you know, $40 to submit. But sometimes you're clicking into something that you do not have, are no longer eligible to play. So it just takes a little bit of extra work from you, like the filmmakers, directors, and producers, to see where your film actually can play. And the benefits of playing more festivals, if you don't want to wait, like Chris suggested, is that you can win an award, and that award can then lead you not only to money, because some festivals are still have huge prize money, and you didn't invest money by traveling there. So but there's also always the benefit of the Oscars. And again, I don't know the new rules for Oscars, but I know that they're flexible. So that's something that if someone has a little bit more insight into, should talk about. If you can play a festival online and still be eligible for an Oscar nomination, but I think it's now flexible. So all of these,
mainly they've moved it back.
They
so
moved it back.
It's 2 months later.
Okay.
Yeah, and the eligibility period is later.
Yeah. So then that takes a lot of your own research to go through these. And yes, I agree with you, Anne. It's definitely very sad to not be able to stand in front of a crowd and have your premiere. And the biggest thing is run into people and, you know, go to a cocktail and get to know someone that might end up being your producer in the future. But festivals are trying their best to try to figure out ways to substitute that in some sense. So going to the panels where your festival plays, attending a lot of the industry events and meetings, and if they have a virtual drinks, why not? And also reaching out to people is not a bad idea. So going through the list of guests and trying to see if you can connect with people. People are being a little bit more flexible with their time. Zoom can be overwhelming after 30 Zoom meetings a day. But, you know, why not? If, you know that this person is reaching out and has potential, you are able to maybe get a meeting that you weren't able to get in the past.
Yeah, I'll say that throughout this week, we've been doing happy hours with filmmakers and doing breakout rooms, which has been really cool to just, be in a room with a good 5 or so filmmakers, and it's for like 10 minutes. And then if you're starting to connect, there's a side, you can side chat, you can exchange links if you couldn't, stream your film during the festival, and get to know people more that way too. And we did have some feedback where it kind of, that may be one aspect of the festival that could carry on later on too, because you have certain people who can't make it to the festival, and doing some sort of virtual happy hour or some sort of virtual meet might be a way for those filmmakers to connect with people who are physically there.
Yes, and say, like, as someone who's originally from Australia, it was never easy to get to film festivals where your films were playing. So I definitely think that definitely helps for filmmakers that don't have deep travel pockets, or or have other jobs that they can't take time off to travel with their films. But that also said, like, I do think it's a really interesting time for filmmakers to think, like, to actually spend the time to think more clearly about their strategy for their film and what they want to achieve, with whether it's like reaching audiences over prestige or like winning awards, like what their aim is, and to think about that for their path forward. Because as everyone has said before, like in America, only a handful of festivals require you to have premiere requirement, and even a lot of even big festivals don't mind if your film has been streaming online. So it could be a good way for you to like test out your audiences and see who it's resonating with, to actually give you a clearer idea of which festivals you might want to focus your film for if you have a limited budget. That said, in Europe, they very much do care about whether it's been online, and I haven't seen much movement for the European festival. So if you were looking for more European market and wanting to show your film there, then the rules are completely different from in the US. So it's a whole, different priority then that you have to think about. Like, so you really need to think about where you want to go, what you hope to achieve with it, and then figure out your best path forward after that.
Stephanie, I'm curious, what kind of attendance did you guys have this year in Palm Springs compared to I mean, was there an increase, a decrease? Was it a wholly different animal this time, or is it the same?
Attendance as far
people enrolling, people submitting, people participating.
Well, I know we had like 6,000 submissions, which I believe was an uptick, but I wasn't here last year, so I don't quote me on that. But I mean, Palm Springs also, I think they issued a statement about refunding from Film Freeway some costs. So, and I haven't seen other film festivals really do that, which I thought was really nice of the festival to do that, considering that maybe people who were submitting didn't know it was going to be online. But yeah, we still had a lot of submissions. And I think because we were still in that period of not knowing if it was going to go virtual or not.
Right. So as far as the market for shorts is concerned, where are we in that universe in terms of films being funded, being able to make money back, being able to be seen? And also, what is the how does the industry discover films so that they can do the kind of talent discovery that leads to a career? Where is that right now? That's a lot to answer. I leave it to you. Maybe Christopher could start.
I actually think there are probably some much more educated voices to this in the moment, specific to shorts, especially those of you who program it, or maybe Diana, who's actively filmmaking right now. I think in order to get seen, you have to be seen. So having a short is a brilliant calling card in making sure you go wide and not be too precious with it, I think is important, because you never know where that audience is that takes you to the next step. And again, anything I say is my opinion. It is not gospel. Everyone on this may have a totally different opinion and experience. So the answer is usually somewhere in the middle. Like, let me put that out there.
Diana, you go for it then.
But the marketplace in terms of making money from a short is not huge. but I think explore, you know, I'm old. When I first started making short films, you know, in the early 2000s, there was still a market for shorts, and you could make your money back. But I will have to say, in this world of streaming content, there are some opportunities to open up, and people are looking at it, and people are much more savvy about putting certain things behind paywalls or turning it into webisodes, all of those things. But I think Diana made the clearest point, which is know your intent and stick with that intent. Is it to get noticed and get an agent? Is it to make money? Is it just to make sure people understand and see your story? And each one of those has a different decision tree. I guess that's not a super clear answer to your question, but again, I think others may have a much more current understanding of sort of the financial marketplace, or how people are getting picked up out of festivals.
Yeah, I definitely think it's different, and it's just as like has been said, knowing what you want to achieve and then trying to figure out a plan to get that. You absolutely need to get seen. So obviously, if you win awards at a big festival, that's definitely going to help you get seen. So the festivals are super important for short filmmakers that are trying to sort of make a mark. But that said, there are other ways. Like, you can either, I mean, and again, you can also hold off right now because there is no rush. Like, waiting 1 year, okay, we still don't know what's happening next year, but waiting 1 year is not going to probably make or break your career. But, you know, if you don't want to wait, if you want to get your film out there, like, again, if it's a film that audiences find, if someone resonates, if you can actually send it or use social media to get the attraction of someone who actually has clout or following, like if it's online, you can build audiences, you can build buzz, you can try to get people to view it and to share it and to spread it. Like, then you're also going to get found that way. I mean, for actors now, they're getting found on TikTok. Like, there's so many different pathways.
We love TikTok today.
Yeah, exactly. And everyone's on it.
Bravo, TikTok.
It's where people go to be entertained. So again, obviously it does depend on what your film's about and the tone of your film and to what the best pathway is going to be for you. But you can also start sending it directly. Like, if you want to get agents, if you want to get managers, you know, if you have a film that you've completed and you haven't been able to premiere because of the pandemic, there's nothing to stop you from reaching out to agents and managers to, you know, sell yourself as well. Like, here, I've made this film, I'd love you to watch it. Am I able to send it to you? You know, there's nothing to stop you from doing the rest of the aspects that you would probably do in conjunction or after a festival screening. You could still do that now if that was your aim.
Does anyone else want to address this?
I think you mentioned the making of money, and I think, and Christopher also mentioned this. I just want to point out that even in the best case scenario, where the film plays, you know, what you think is the most luxurious streaming, or you're not going to make that much money. It's $1,000. Maybe. So, but the sad part is in the US, and I know a lot of people are not from the US, we don't have financial support for independent films, especially short films. So it's essentially, this is an investment for yourself. And, you know, if you focus on the idea of wanting to tell the story, you have to tell the story, and nothing in your life matters but telling this story, then that's the biggest benefit. And these shorts are still a way that not only agents but producers and managers look for new talent. People are constantly looking for new voices to add to writers' room, new voices to add to, you know, directors' rosters. So there is a benefit to making a short film, just that it's not always going to be weighted with financial gain.
Well, we know that filmmakers like Damien Chazelle, you know, who made Whiplash and La La Land, but Whiplash was a short, right? And then Gillian Robespierre, Obvious Child, they grew their features from shorts. So this is one way. You make a big splash with a short that is so compelling that the industry clamors for more and is willing to finance it on the basis of that. Are there any more recent examples of that kind of trajectory, which is, of course, the fantasy gold ring, but it works sometimes.
One I know of, there's a short film festival I'm a patron of in Wales called the Iris Prize, which is specific to queer shorts. The winner every year gets brought back and given £50,000 in We EP Your Next Short. So there was an Australian who did a short called Followers, financed by us, and was able to use that and go back to Australia for government funding. So I do think they make a great calling card. It is because of government funding and the way funding works in territories other than the US, a good opportunity to kick things off. But there are plenty of examples. You know, Dee Reese with Pariah,
Absolutely.
short to feature. Angela Robinson with Debs, short to feature. But again, these were really specific personal stories. It goes back to what all the panelists were saying about sticking to an authentic voice and something you're super passionate about, because you'll do the best job. And you know, will appeal to somebody in the same way. So, I mean, the entertainment industry is a Monte Carlo scenario to begin with. But again, I think shorts are the way to hone your craft and tell some of these brilliantly specific stories.
All right, we've got some questions. One of them is, this is a classic question. It's the question we always see here. And it's the one that almost has no answer, I think, but maybe you do know. How do you get the attention of agents and managers? And you're not allowed to contact them. So how do you get their attention?
By playing festivals like Palm Springs. They have relationships with agents and managers. And for example, in one of my favorite places to go hang out with agents and managers of the year is always the Palm Springs Film Festival, because they are all invited and they get invited to do, you know, industry events and watch the shorts and play on juries. So usually these people attend, and it's part of their own yearly rituals where they make, you know, their own assistants go through the lineup, etc. I think that's one option.
Anybody else?
It's not entirely true you can't write to them, because you can. You just can't send them things in your initial email. So you can actually write to them and ask if they would look at something that you have, because if you sound interesting to them, if you've done a good job, they're going to want to have a look at your work, because they are always looking for new talent. But there are other ways if you wanted to go for and obviously do your research, make sure the person that you're reaching out to is someone you're actually interested in, that you know their work. Don't just randomly email every agent and manager in the book. You need to have a strategy about this, because if you're looking for representation, it's not going to do you any good to have someone who has no clue about what your voice is. It has to be specific to you. But there's also, if you know people that are reps, you can ask them to watch your short, and if they like it, then maybe they'll be able to forward it on to their people, and who could then recommend someone else in their company that might want to meet with you. It's all, again, just being seen. So it's finding whatever way you can, politely and within the rules of legal rules, that is, not necessarily societal rules, but legal rules, to do that.
I am always a fan of making best friends with the PAs and the assistants.
Yes.
They are the real gatekeepers, as are junior programmers. They all want and need to find new talent, because it is how they advance. These folks keep you in or out of the bigger agent's office. And when they become a bigger agent and you have been their friend, polite, wonderful, bringing them things, they remember you and help bring you along with. I think we oftentimes aim at only those star level, what have you, and don't develop our own strata of colleagues across festivals and agencies. And those folks are around and they're looking. So make sure you know who they are and you find them.
I'd like to add that in my research, when I'm talking to agents about inclusion and what they're doing and what their actual activities are, they will talk about, it's not just your short, but some of the peripheral content around it. So it could be a podcast about making your film. It could be literature that you've done, whether it's a blog or a children's book or a comic book, all of these things that exemplify you as a creator will add to you as the storyteller for your films as well. So I value all of those other pieces of content that filmmakers can make to support their project that sometimes aren't as expensive as the film itself, because they are looking at that stuff. They are listening to podcasts. They are trying to find talent in all of the ways possible. And then these more, the more available outlets like TikTok and things like that, they're paying attention to those things to try to find content. So it's more than just your film. It's you as a creator as well.
So if I know that Palm Springs and Sundance are, you know, you get incredible numbers of submissions and everybody's coming to you, but you do go to other festivals to look for talent as well. What are the primary festivals? This is one of the questions from the audience that you would send people to look for new talent.
I love Black Star. I always look at what is being curated through them. And then they also offer a lot of great programming through social media. They did a screening this summer for Love Song for Latasha with a panel. So they're always doing interesting things. And that's one of the places that I will always go to look.
Anyone else?
There's also, like, outside of like traditional festivals, there's also different like art institutes and cinemas that also do screening series of shorts, and that's another really good place to you know, try to get a film seen. And there again, it's all about knowing what they're looking for and who their audience is, and then looking for those places where you think your film fits.
So another question is about the idea that, of course, you are looking for a diversity of voices, but how do you deal with the question of quotas? I mean, are you asking for people's sexual orientation? Are you trying to reserve a certain number of films for each group? That's the question from one of the attendees.
I see the question. The asking of sexual orientation or any kind of fact is simply for it's to get ahead of the game in terms of when we accept a film, we publish these numbers, but it really has nothing to do with the submission. So we usually don't look at you know, those numbers or those signifiers until the very end. So I know a lot of people get a little bit caught up in those facts when you're submitting through Film Freeway, but that's simply just for us to get that out of the way in terms of when we accept a film, it's harder to get you to fill out a form than, you know, in the beginning. It's just, if it's, you know, if it's easy for us to figure out that stuff in the beginning, it's just what we, you know, the easiest way to maneuver this whole thing.
Add the programmers, sorry, is that okay, Anne? I'll add, I think programmers are looking at those answers to those questions. However, a lot of the grants that support the festivals do know that you're supporting equity, that you're addressing these things. So those back-end numbers become like part of the logistics that the operations needs to be able to continue to fund themselves. And I know, for example, I know Cucaloris, before they ever published that they were 50% female and 50% male as far as the filmmakers, that they were doing that for years, right? That was an internal decision that they wanted to make sure that they were creating fair representation on their filmmakers. So a lot of festivals have done that internally, even before it was necessarily as public or as supportive to getting more grants for the nonprofits.
I will say Outfest intentionally did that while I was there. You know, we were called White Fest for a lot of years. I mean, let's just call it out, because the white gay male had the access to money and opportunity. So while there, we put an internal benchmark that 2/3 of board, content, and educational program participants were women, people of color, trans folks, and other underrepresented, because it did become an equity issue within our community. And if we do not assure more equitable access, both to means and to audience, it wasn't going to change. So we did take a very specific and political stance. Again, not a quota, but an aim. And I'm really proud for the past 3 years we've hit that. I'm no longer there. I still say we, but it is a tradition that's continued. And not every festival can do that, but it was a choice we made.
Yeah. And for us, we're very equity minded in our programming, but also we really like to keep an eye on who's submitting, what our submission pool looks like. And we can see with certain markers, like with, for example, gender, our submissions are 50-50. We have parity within the gender of our submitters, and that's something that then can naturally translate into our program. And then the goal is really to diversify that submission pool in every possible way. And so we can kind of be tracking that and saying, okay, where do we need to be reaching out? Where do we need to be having more of a programmatic focus? Who's not represented here, who we could be reaching out to? So that's definitely something that we're trying to more or less in real time, because our submissions are open year round. It's always in real time, be keeping an eye on, and then forming either partnerships or reaching out to organizations and seeing where we could be more inclusive.
Where do you go to find those filmmakers? I mean, who are you reaching out to?
So typically we have kind of a broad swath of community partners where there are a lot of organizations that focus specifically on certain communities of filmmakers. I think the latest example was we have monthly In Focus programs where one of our programs every month is focused on a particular group of filmmakers and spotlighting a particular voice. And a few years ago, one of the newer ones that we introduced into that was In Focus Veteran Cinema, and looking at veterans behind the camera. And we realized that we didn't have a great representation of veterans in our submissions pool. And that was something that we kind of needed to then reach out and kind of learn about that filmmaking community. And then we looked at organizations that specifically support veteran filmmakers and talked to them about what we wanted to do, partnered with USVAA and some of the writers in their groups, and got the word out that way. And so then now we're kind of years on, we're seeing that submission pool become more robust, and we're cultivating it. And that's something that is now beginning to be naturally reflected in what we're doing. So it's really specific organizations that have been championing those filmmakers, fundamentally, and that's their main focus, either festivals or professional organizations. If you look, you'll find them, but it's a matter of looking effectively.
I'm just really curious what this whole pandemic is going to do in terms of accelerating some of the market forces that were already underway, i.e. the future of the 2-hour film, as a career, as opposed to heading into streaming and television and all of that. What do you guys think about that? I am a big fan of the 2-hour movie. I've lived in love of it for my whole career, and I'm looking at it as a little bit of an endangered species. What do you guys think?
Well, I think as independent filmmakers, it's been getting increasingly more difficult to finance and kind of make films in the last few years anyway. So I do, but again, with everyone staying home now and everybody turning on to streamers, at the same time, there has been opportunity at certain streamers to get certain independent films screened. But at the same time, it's definitely been an uphill struggle. And for most independent filmmakers, I definitely think this is an extraordinarily difficult time, because not only can we can't do production for probably a very long time, because even though a lot of big films might be going back, TV might be going back, independent films just don't have the extra resources to do everything in a safe way right now. And so most producers will not be going back into production, and for quite some time. So it depends on really whether the market feels the loss. I think if people start demanding it, then there's going to be people that are going to step up to try to fill that gap. But I definitely think in the short term, it's going to be really interesting to see what happens. depends on how creative people can be in getting their films out there, but I don't think there's a traditional route, you know, particularly now with the big streamers like Netflix. They don't really even look at independent films anymore, you know. But writing's been on the wall for a little while, but I guess it's just going to have to wait and see a little bit.
I apologize for taking up so much space. I realize how much I've spoken and don't want to step on others. I take much like Dinah, I take a filmmaker specific look at it, in that it is, we want to make more features, but we also want to eat. And I think Jamie Babbitt is a great example of somebody who has balanced all of this. You know, starts with films like But I'm a Cheerleader, but then goes into some episodic directing, because that pays the bills and takes care of her and her daughter, and she continues to learn and hone her craft, and then goes back, and because she becomes more of a name, it's easier for her. It's never easy to make a film, but it's relatively easier for her to make a film. Then she can dip back and do a music video or a commercial. I think for the long-term trajectory of most filmmakers, it behooves them to become at least conversant in how to write, structure, direct multiple forms of moving image. I think it will give them the most opportunity, long run, to continue to work and nourish themselves as artists and as people putting food on the table, because again, this is a tough business. But you look at, it was either last year or this, and Anne, you may know better, there was something like 450 episodic shows in production, either last year or the year before. So that's 450 writers' rooms, 450 sets of directors. So my great good hope is, in the long run, it will allow more diverse voices opportunity to get in. So yes, I love film and want people to make film, but look at all those opportunities to nourish yourself as artist and as a human, so that you have a long, stable career.
There is an argument for filmmakers learning their chops in television, and someone like the late great Lynn Shelton is an example of that. I still am upset by that loss. What are the pros and cons of a monthly festival like New Filmmakers LA is one of the questions. Brevin?
So I know New Filmmakers is not a scam. That's a question. They're not a scam.
I didn't put that part in.
No, I know, but I want to address it. I would like to address it, because I do think you need to do your research on Film Freeway.
Yeah.
Right? It's just as easy for a film festival to put themselves up on Film Freeway as it is for a filmmaker to put themselves up. So do your research, make sure that they have reviews, right? Contact a real person, make sure that their agenda aligns with yours. There's nothing wrong with a monthly film festival, right? But make sure it has an agenda like New Filmmakers, where they're really trying to support emerging talent, or they really want to get to an audience that you want to get to, because there are things on Film Freeway that probably don't address the things that you want or the goals that you have.
Yeah.
Well, go ahead. We're going to wind down. We're running out of time. Clay has popped back up to remind us that our time is up. Clay, can she say
okay.
something,
yeah,
or should we?
It's okay.
Okay.
Finish your thoughts.
Yeah. Just to add a couple of things. So yeah, I mean, Film Freeway has gotten better at eliminating scam festivals from their platform, but it's still, you know, a process, and festivals sometimes will be on there for some period of time. So I think it comes back to, I mean, now as before, do your research, as Brevin said, talk to filmmakers who played festivals, look at their site, look at their reviews, look at the films that have gone through there before, and like really, for kind of as a starting point for any festival, monthly or otherwise, when you're looking at submitting somewhere, there are places that you can kind of go to vet the festivals that you're looking at. Kind of a great place for that is Film Festival Alliance is a group of festivals that have all gotten together and are kind of operating under a certain code of ethics. They're all mission-driven festivals, which effectively means that they are all dedicated to serving filmmakers in one form or another. So that's a great list to look at. Also in the current climate, definitely festivals that have signed the Seed and Spark Pledge would be a good place to look, though that's not a completely inclusive list, but there are some fantastic festivals on there. And so these are kind of resources that you can use as a starting point to see what festivals are effectively, dedicated to being on the filmmaker side, for lack of a better term.
Good way of putting it. That was good.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. You've been fabulous. I appreciate you taking the time. And
Yes,
to you, Clay.
absolutely. Oh, well, thank you. And everybody here, you all, this was such a fascinating conversation that could have gone on for another at least 3 hours, in my opinion. I know that there's probably many more questions out there that didn't get answered, but hopefully you, as attendees, have learned a lot from this. I know I have. Thank you again, attendees. I know we can't see you or hear you, but please give a round of applause to this incredible panel. We know that your time is especially valuable right now, so really appreciate you taking some time to be here with us. And there is one more forum session later today, and then 3 more tomorrow. So if you're still craving more information, check those out, to all of our attendees. And otherwise, have a wonderful rest of your Sunday, everybody. Thank you.